A lot of people here who I'm sure have questions, but I want to I'll start with a couple and then I'll open it up. Um, Maybe you can both start because I know you've been thinking about this film, working on this film for quite a while. And it's a very layered film with a lot of different points of entry. And I'm just wondering what the starting point was, if there was a particular idea, character, image, theme. That,
Yes, so multiple things. So I've been trying to write this script on and off for 8-ish years, and the origin of the story starts with my mother. She's Sierra Leonean. She's out here in the audience, and she's seen every rough cut, but still cries. So I did something right. But it was a project that originated. She did some domestic work on and off. So among other jobs, domestic work was one of the most accessible jobs that my mom could get consistently. And then I got to fast forward. I got to Tish. It was something that was gestating, and I got to NYU grad film, and literally the visual manifestation of what I had been sitting on was happening around Tish. Like I saw all of these black and brown women pushing white children in strollers, and I was like, this is a sign. I try to pay attention to the universe when it speaks, and so I put pen to paper, but I didn't want to tell a straightforward drama rendition of a domestic worker. And obviously there were multiple influences, but yeah, those were the bare bones origins of the story.
and Nikkia, you've been attached from how long? How long ago did you come on board for this?
I mean, when we first met, it was one of the first projects she shared with me that she was kind of dancing around. And me personally, my aunts are Aisha to a certain degree. Like I had a lot of family members that, when they came over, they were the nannies on the Park Avenue, Upper East Side. So it was just familiar and really important to me just to excavate what that is.
I hope I don't fall in front of y'all. I was gonna add Nikkia. She was pivotal in me finishing the script, and so oftentimes when rising directors ask me like, what are the variables that helped you to make your first feature? One variable that is the key variable is a creative producer who really believed in the story just as much, if not more, than I did. Because you get in your head, you're like, this is too specific. Nobody's gonna give us money. Nobody cares about this story. But she was really just integral to me finishing the draft that we ultimately got financed.
So to come back to something you said you didn't want to do a straightforward drama.
Yeah.
So I think when you think if you're going to have a film about an immigrant experience, you might think of it being more of like a social realist type film. You've kind of worked with genre, but even within genre, not in entirely expected or straightforward ways. It's a horror film, but I think you use horror to open up into more like complex psychological and political areas. And within horror, you also bring in like folklore, and so you can talk a little bit about just the what you conceptualize this film as. This you had the story, but you told it in I think a very surprising way.
Yeah. So I want to be clear that no matter how our film is marketed and distributed, no, you know, it's
There are people in the audience who might want to hear what you.
it's very much cross genre. And
Yes.
the films that influence me, like the filmmakers who influence me, like Lynn Ramsey, Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho, Usman Sembeni, like these are filmmakers who really lean into multiple genres within one film. And so I'm not naive to think that my film is one thing. Like I know that it's multiple things wrapped up into this really eclectic package of a film. Did I answer the question?
I think so. No, that was good. But do you want to elaborate on what
Cross genre.
cross genre
For
means?
example, a film like The Host, Bong Joon-ho, like you have this creature and you have creature creation. Even Guillermo del Toro, who I really love, you have this family unit at the heart of the story. It's about these familial interactions that are universal, but you have like this icing of creature creation and monsters and I think those elements, like you alluded to, are a way into stories that typically might feel like a PSA. So that's what I mean by cross genre. So I think and then you have the love story and all the other elements happening.
I'm curious about one particular aspect of the film, which is how you incorporated folklore and mythology, specifically West African folklore. And you talk a little bit about the importance of that to
Yeah,
you?
I really wanted to not just. It's hard to create creatures on a budget. Do I wish we had $50 million more to create a mermaid? Sure, but I really did want to peek into the world of Anansi, the spider, and Mami Wata because they're two of the more visible figures in West African folklore, and African diaspora is so prevalent in the United States that I think that I'm really interested in that cultural specificity within the paradigm of American cinema. So I'm interested in maneuvering the African immigrant experience through those fantastical elements, but also like the trickster figures, universal. You have Brer Rabbit. You have Native Americans have their individual trickster figures. So there is a universality to both Mami Wata and Anansi the spider.
And I just want to add a quick point. When we were financing and kind of like getting everything together, we had a lot of questions, and I'd go so far as to say pressure to kind of simplify and pick one or the two. And I just want to say we really stuck to our guns and trusted that our audience would follow us. I think people are ready to be inundated with something other than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I think the specificity is really important to the film. Question about casting. Can you talk a bit about your amazing lead actress?
I love casting. I love that part of the process. So much hinges on casting. So Anna is someone who I literally just superficially saw her face and was like, this is a face I could look at for 90 minutes plus. And so I was hoping that in addition to that face, there was some range. And so we got lucky because we had formal auditions at the peak of the pandemic over Zoom. We had an amazing casting director, Kim Coleman, who does just stellar casting across the board. And so she showed me a lot of Aishas. And I was rooting for Anna and she killed it. So it came down to her and a couple of young ladies. But ultimately, I also wanted to do chemistry casting because I think chemistry is a lost art on the screen. Instead of just forcing people together because this person is an A-lister and this person is a B-plus lister, let's throw them in a film. But that chemistry doesn't translate when you do it like that. So, I paired people up and ultimately came up with the cast of like Michelle Monaghan, Sinqua. Everyone was kind of paired up and bounced off each other in the audition process for the most part. Rose, the little girl, was hard because these kids have spent like half their lives in a pandemic. So it was really tricky to cast that age range online. I'm not online, but via like over the screen as opposed to in person. So we winnowed it down to 3 or 4 girls, and Rose just had this maturity that I knew that we needed. I knew I needed a little girl who was not rambunctious, but was able to. She was so good with the horrific elements that she literally did not react when Anna raised the knife. Like I had to. She's so measured, and so mature. I'm like, you're scared, Rose. The night that she's gonna kill you, but you need that maturity because you need a child who's not gonna freak out when they see fake blood or a knife or a prop knife. So those were some of the elements that we thought about when we were casting.
All right, just one more from me, and then I'll open it up. You mentioned the difficulty of having creatures on a budget. Seems like you're a producer here. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, the film. I don't want to talk about figures and everything, but the film looks amazing.
Thank you,
And
Rena Yang, Jonathan Guggenheim. Any opportunities to shout out my department heads? And I don't know if anyone is here. Oh yes, Chloe's here from the art department.
And Chris,
And I think more people
Chris
than
is
that,
here.
maybe. Let me not
from
start shouting
cameras
people out
here.
because I'm going to leave people out. But yes, our department heads and our teams, our creative teams were just so brilliant. And we had the same interview process for them that we did for our cast. So really it was about finding people who had a singular vision but also understood the bigger vision. Um, we had a really talented team.
Nikkia, you want to talk a bit more about this?
About the creatures? Your
The
original
team
question?
About
that
putting this whole thing
helped the
together.
creatures come
But,
together.
No, I mean, to be fair, like, we really, it was divine intervention. Everyone was shooting that summer. Like, everyone had decided they were going to shoot their film before COVID came back in the fall. And Rena, we had one call and knew.
Yeah.
Jonathan, we had a couple calls, but we kind of knew. And they were both like right on the precipice of like leaping ahead. Like, Rena's doing everything now, and Jonathan had just done Scream, and it just,
Yeah.
the stars aligned. And the project, you know, I think it just worked out.
And then the VFX.
With
teams.
VFX, VFX was tough, but we had really great partners that believed in the story. And, you know, you never want people on your team who believe they're doing favors. You want people who are invested, and we really got lucky because it was not the budget. It was the script. You know what I mean? And they knew we were gonna like nail it no matter what. They believed in us.
All right, we're going to take some questions from the audience, and I think we have microphones going around. So if, yeah, we do. So if you want to raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you.
Yeah, I noticed that both in Suicide by Sunlight and this one, you have a lot of use of blue color scheme. Can you talk about your use of blue color scheme just within Nanny?
Thank you for noticing. The aquamarine
Just
landscape.
mentioned he was alluding to your short film as well. That,
I love
came out
that.
with-
Thank you. I have an infatuation with like a lagoon aqua landscape. I think water is a motif in a lot of my work for various reasons. And so that lends to it. But also our art department really leaned into the water motif in Nanny particularly, but also juxtaposing the blues and greens in Amy and Adam's home versus the blues and greens that we see
All right, Greg,
on the screen
come on.
for new directors, new films. But yeah, it's a prevalent motif. I'm gonna make sure my next film I have no blues at all.
Hi. This was such a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
For this movie. I am really curious about your inspiration for sound and really putting that together. I just really noticed a lot of really intricate blending of both diegetic sound and also just in the world. So I'd love for you to talk more about that.
Yes. The soundscape was immensely important to us, and Nikkia knows. Like I try to start planning the landscape in, within the script. I mean, I'm the writer director, so it's easy to write the soundscape into the actual script. I love filmmakers like Lynn Ramsey who really just feature the soundscape as a character in itself, and so I knew that I wanted sounds to be a transitionary device as well. So like hard cuts that like throw us into the next scene versus diegetic sounds in the world that take Aisha out of these moments where she's fixating on the supernatural. All of those were elements. And also we got to work with an amazing artist, Teneriel, who collaborated with Bartek for our score. And so we were able to build the motif of breaths and breathlessness into the soundscape because, the whole film is essentially about just being capitalism having a chokehold on us in these different ways, figuratively, but literally also obviously losing her child to drowning and that breathlessness. So thank you for noticing the work that we put into the soundscape.
Hi, can you, I just loved it, so cheers.
Cheers. I wish
Congrats.
I had wine. Cheers.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about your collaboration with Rena, with your cinematographer? And I'm
Yeah.
also interested to know, like, did you storyboard, did you shortlist? Is it more references? Is it a combination of both? Like, what was that process like for you?
These are good questions. Yes. So we did We actually had a really informal way of exchanging imagery. Rena is not a big talker. Rena is brilliant. She has a vision, but she's not super verbose. So we exchanged a lot of imagery really informally, literally over iPhone. Like we created these albums in iPhotos and would just upload stuff like in real time. If she stumbled across something or I did, and then we had more formal elements. She did a diagram, which I love that she drew directly on the location photos that we shot while we were scouting and doing tech scouts. She literally drew grids on top of that. So that was really helpful for me, for my brain. And then we had an amazing storyboard artist that Nikkia actually found.
Yeah, I mean, we were really careful about storyboarding the big kind of like set pieces and the VFX scene so that we could kind of walk in not blind, but then also plan like what was going to be practical and then what was actually going to be VFX. Because when you have a shoestring budget, you got to pick and choose your battles.
We don't have to talk about the budget anymore. They get it.
Right. I think this one over here.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a bit about the 8 years of development and how the project evolved thematically over this time.
Did you say thematically? Can you elaborate?
Just because it felt very topical, obviously, after everything we've been through, and obviously it's been something that you've been thinking about since 8 years ago. So
Yeah.
just how it's evolved.
Yeah, that's it. People always are curious about like how did you not give up on this idea that you chipped away at for so long, which is a good question. Partly I'm insane, and also the other element is that I couldn't shake the story. So I have a process of collecting imagery, like as an ongoing process. Everything that I write starts with imagery. And I'm old school, but I'm still on Tumblr. I love Tumblr. I think there's some amazing imagery there. I have a blog that I frequent Tumblr and I always just keep track. I think the key for every project, whether it's 8 years or 1 year, is to keep some sort of documentation of what inspires you that speaks to that project. So I had imagery from photographers I love. I had imagery from painters I love. I had poems, Warsan Shire, her poetry, and just collecting all kinds of disparate elements, but that still spoke thematically to the film. Really helped for me to stay, in the story.
I feel like my question is very simple. But the mermaid always, whenever the mermaid had her arms are always facing, were like up towards the surface. Did you choose to do that like just like visually because they were shadows? Or was it purposeful?
Whatever you interpreted. It's your film now. It's in the world. No, you know what? The the stunt elements were tricky in the water. And so at some point we really had to be strategic about her arms. I'm kind of sad that you noticed that. Like, is that a compliment? No. Uh, so let me not say too much, but it's tricky with water. Water is an element that is very unpredictable, and having two stunt women like sink in water is not as simple as it sounds. And so we had a lot of navigating what that could look like, and then we had like practical effects and CGI effects that came later. So to just be clean and safe, oftentimes her arms needed to be down, but when she was surfacing with Mami Wata, her arms were raised, and because it's an upending and she's, coming back to the surface. I don't know if I answered your question. Okay.
Hi, Nikyatu. How you doing?
I'm great. Depends on your question.
First of all, great film.
Thank
I
you.
loved every second of it. I just wanted to ask, how does it feel after 8 long years to see your dream child realized,
You should ask your sister.
Hey, Nikki, how does it feel?
I mean, I don't know how it feels for her dream child to be born, but as a producer, no, it's very rewarding, Kari. Thanks for asking.
I think we have a couple down here.
What was your favorite scene to direct?
Autumn. I hope there are no children in the audience. I can't see. You know, the romance is fun. It's more fun than I thought. But also, I love the water work. I love water. I love stunt people. I really respect what they do. And it was just so intricate mapping out some of the stunt work. I love all the athleticism that we had and navigating water and jumping into water and shooting underwater. We had an underwater unit, Ian Takahashi. Um, and he was our underwater DP, and seeing him communicate with Rena was really fun. So all of the underwater work. Good question, Autumn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if I'm answering,
Yeah.
I would say it's all about the prep for me, like the preparation.
Lesson.
Shooting is cool, but preparation is really exciting.
It's important.
First of all, congratulations. It's Okima.
There you are.
Congratulations to you both. As a producer, girl,
you.
Nikki, my
Which
hat is
one?
off, sis. My hat is off.
Oh,
'cause
okay,
I
thanks.
can only.
I need it. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank
And
you.
Nikyatu, the question is for you specifically. We see this beautiful movie. We've seen all the clippings. We've seen all the deadline articles and all the beguiling things that come after all of this, right?
What are you about to say?
How do you, as a creative, take care of yourself in the midst of the chaos of the good and the crazy? Because I think we all are like, oh my God, we want to be there. We want to, we want the Amazon Studios joint to open up our film. But what do you do for yourself in the midst of all of this to celebrate that after 8 years, the baby was actually born?
Man. You know, you have that moment in your brain where you're like, am I going to tell the truth? Am I going to tell them what I think they need to hear? Tequila for sure. Sleep. But no, self-care is so important in this process. And actually, we did the Sundance Lab. So we did the Screenwriters Lab, Producing Lab, Directors Lab for this project, all three of those labs. And they really funneled us through. And one of my mentors, I don't know if you all are familiar with Corinne Kusama, The Invitation, Jennifer's Body. She was one of my mentors, and Casey Lemons was also one of my mentors. And I was so delighted that they both organically mentioned self-care as part of their mentorship. They weren't just talking about craft. They really were clear that if you don't take care of yourself as the director and create a space that feels safe for everyone else, then it's just going to be really toxic and not as strong of a film as it can be. And so that's an important question. But yes, I practice many variations of self-care when I can.
Be quick. Congratulations, Nikyatu.
Thank you.
Film. Could you say something about the locations? I thought your locations were really, really stunning. And of course, all the production design that went with sort of heightening it, etc. But also just keeping in mind that, you shot this during pandemic and I don't know I'm assuming these were locations and not sets, but
I'm going to let Nikkia take that one. From one amazing filmmaker with a lot of locations herself. You had a lot of locations. Go ahead.
Well, we had a really great location manager, very resilient, strong-willed, and so you're correct. We didn't have a ton of stuff on a set. We happened to find people who had beautiful locations, who actually were interested in film and liked the idea of participating. Our condo location was real. Like everything you saw on screen, like we didn't build that up. That person just let us in, and we did our best. We just did our best. It's really hard to extrapolate on this stage.
It was hard. The condo gave us a hard time. Getting into moneyed spaces in New York is not cheap. So the condo we lost it, then we got it back, and then they were negotiating. So the condo was trickier than it looks. And then with the airport, it was navigating COVID, and everybody was so stressed. But the day we shot, it was
That might have been
like
one
the
of the
heavens
easier
opened up,
locations. Yeah.
and somebody was watching over us. I think my dad was watching over us for that part of for the whole shoot. Actually, we didn't get a positive COVID test in Zone A. Those of you who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about until the second to last day of production. It was challenging, but we made it through.
And we didn't shut down. We didn't.
Almost.
But we didn't.
All right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It was really beautiful, the movie. And I wanted you to talk about what was the toughest moment during these 8 years, like the moment that you kind of sit down with your dream and your reality, and then you choose to follow the dream.
That's a good question. There were a lot of really difficult moments. The most difficult was my dad got sick. Whoever, if y'all have followed any part of me, you know that I cried like a baby when we won the grand jury prize for Sundance, because my dad got sick as I was trying to finish the script for production. And I just really told myself that I have to finish this because I don't think he's gonna be here much longer. And I don't know what grief is going to do to my work ethic. I mean, we know what grief does to our work ethic, but in a capitalist system, nobody cares about your grief. So I knew that I had to hurry up and finish the draft. And so there was a clock that was externalized by that, what I was navigating with my dad being sick. But yeah, everything after that, like after losing someone that you love so much, everything else becomes, you just get perspective about what you're actually working on. Like, this is something that is such a privilege to be able to make a film about my lineage and about the people I love in a pandemic. It's such a privilege. So I was able to get context after losing my dad in the process. But that was the most difficult part, writing while having a sick relative, a sick parent.
I feel like we need an upbeat ending.
He's like, more jokes.
No, so we'll take one more question.
Less trauma.
Okay, we will take one more, since there clearly are more from the audience. Let's do one more.
Okay, this is not a question. I just wanted to thank you so much for following through after those 8 years of you writing this, because it really hit home for me. My first job when I moved here was babysitting. So when I was watching this, I was like, oh my God.
Was it triggering?
I was like, oh my God, this is me. But it was just really nice to shine a light on that experience for people, because I feel like not a lot of people experience that from that side, you know? And when I was here and like experiencing that, I didn't have anyone to talk to about it, or like to explain like my feelings, like how I felt while doing this job. So I just wanted to thank you for following through with your story. I really appreciated it, and I think it was beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautifully written.
Thank you for sharing that too. Yeah.
I think
You can't really top that.
That's a great place to end. Yeah, we're not going to top that. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, y'all.